The call came on a Thursday. That's the detail I can't shake, not the betrayal itself, but how ordinary the moment was when my life shattered. Mr. Marlowe, we've processed the final paperwork on your Ocean View property. The voice belonged to someone I'd never met. Congratulations on the sale. My heart stopped. I'm sorry, what sale? A pause. The beach house on Lighthouse Point? The buyer's wire transfer just cleared. Your son said you were eager to close quickly. I was still in my hospital bed. Day 4 after cardiac surgery. The stitches pulled as I sat up too quickly. There must be a mistake, I said, my mouth dry. I never listed my house. I heard keyboard clicks, then. The documentation shows power of attorney signed over to Nolan Marlowe 3 weeks ago. Everything appears in order. The room tilted. 3 weeks ago when they wheeled me in for pre-op. When Nolan had brought those papers, saying, "Just some insurance forms, Dad. Nothing to worry about." "And the Aston Martin?" I asked, already knowing. "Included in the sale package, yes." The new owners were quite excited about that. My vintage 1963 DB5, the car I'd restored bolt by bolt after Nolan's mother left us. The one possession I'd told him would be his someday, not for him to sell while I was still breathing. Who authorized this sale? Which agency? The question came out sharp enough to make the nurse glance over. Pacific Legacy Realty handled everything. Very smooth transaction. The room went silent. Not because of shock, but because of clarity. Pure, crystalline understanding. Pacific Legacy. My company. The one I built from nothing. The one where I still owned controlling interest but had stepped back from daily operations. Who was the listing agent? My voice was eerily calm now. Let me check. Vincent Porter. Vince. My protégé. The young man who owed his career to me. "Thank you," I said, and ended the call. I lay back, staring at ceiling tiles. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. Something colder and more precise was building inside me. My son had stolen my home and my car while I recovered from having my chest cut open. He'd forged power of attorney. He'd cashed out my life and thought I wouldn't notice or couldn't fight back. But he'd made one catastrophic miscalculation. He'd used my own company to do it. The nurse approached, concerned by my monitors. "Mr. Marlowe, your heart rate is elevated. Are you in pain?" "No," I said. "I'm actually feeling very clear now." I pressed the call button for my doctor. I needed to get discharged immediately. Within hours, I was signing release papers against medical advice. The surgeon frowned. "This is reckless, Elias. The risk of complications." "The complications are already happening," I said, "and they're not medical." The taxi dropped me at a modest hotel downtown. Not home, there was no home anymore. Just a sold sign on my property and strangers sleeping in my bed. I opened my laptop and logged into the Pacific Legacy private server. My credentials still worked. Of course they did, no one expected me to be watching. Not while I was supposed to be recuperating. The sale documents loaded on my screen. Ocean View Estate, sold to Meridian Shore Holdings LLC for $3.8 million, nearly $1 million below market value. The Aston Martin thrown in for no additional consideration. I searched for Meridian Shore Holdings, new company, incorporated just 2 weeks ago. And there it was, primary stakeholders, Nolan Marlowe and Ivy Calder Marlowe. My son and his wife had created a shell company to buy my property from themselves at a discount. But here was the beautiful irony that made my surgical scar pulse. As majority owner of Pacific Legacy Realty, I effectively controlled both sides of this transaction. Every document, every signature, every falsified approval, all existed on servers I owned, in a company whose bylaws I had written. I picked up my phone and called Marisol Ben-Ari, our title officer, and the most meticulous person I knew. "Elias?" Her surprise was evident. "Aren't you supposed to be in hospital?" "Plans changed," I said. "I need you to freeze a transaction, Lighthouse Point property. Pull everything, verification records, signatures, the entire chain of approval. That's your house," she said slowly. "Your son said." My son lied. I cut in. "And I'm going to prove it." As I hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from Nolan. "Hope you're feeling better, Dad. Don't worry about anything. I've handled it all." I looked at his words and felt something harden in my chest that had nothing to do with my recent surgery. "Yes," I whispered to the empty hotel room. "You've handled it exactly the way I'm going to handle you." I opened my laptop again and began to type. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was mine. This was about justice served cold and precise through the very system my son thought would protect his theft. He'd sold my soul while I was healing, but he had no idea that I owned the agency where his betrayal was still being processed. And that was just the beginning of what he didn't know. If you're feeling that knot in your stomach right now, that mixture of anger and anticipation, just know this story gets so much deeper. I almost couldn't finish recording this because of what happens next. Subscribe now so you don't miss next. For those saying, I'll watch later without subscribing, just remember, the algorithm buries non-subscribed content. Your choice if you want to see how Elias gets justice, but don't come back to the comments later asking what happened. The next part changes everything. Before I tell you how I dismantled my son's betrayal, you need to understand what he tried to steal. Not just property, but legacy. My legacy. Pacific legacy. Realty wasn't handed to me. I built it from nothing but determination and a rusted desk I found at a yard sale. 40 years ago, I was just Elias Marlowe, the son of a fisherman, with no college degree but a mind for details. I started as a property manager for vacation rentals, the guy who fixed toilets at 2 a.m. when rich tourists called complaining. My first office was a converted storage closet in the Harbor Marina building. The rent was cheap because it smelled like fish bait, but location? Prime. Every wealthy visitor walked past my window. My first listing came from desperation, the Sanderson divorce. They needed to sell their beach cottage quickly, and no one else would touch it due to the legal complications. I stayed up 3 nights straight researching maritime property laws, found a loophole in their deed restriction, and sold that house for 30% above asking. Word spread. The desperate, the difficult, the complicated cases, they all came to me. By year 5, I had 3 agents working under me. By year 10, 12, I moved from the bait closet to a proper office on Main Street with a brass plaque that read, Pacific Legacy Realty, where integrity meets opportunity. That plaque cost me 2 weeks' profit, but I polished it every morning before opening, because it wasn't just words, it was a promise. You built this company on solved problems. My first assistant, Gloria, once said, not just sales. She was right. My reputation wasn't for selling the most properties, it was for never having a sale fall through, never having a client come back with complaints. I guaranteed my work with my name. When Cecilia Nolan's mother and I married, the company was thriving. She loved my ambition but hated the hours. You're married to that office, she'd say. And she wasn't wrong. When Nolan was born, I bought the Lighthouse Point property. 3 acres of oceanfront land with a house that needed work, lots of work. But the location was unmatched, and I knew its value would only increase. This is for his future, I told Cecilia, holding infant Nolan as we stood on the wraparound porch that first day. Something solid he can always count on. The irony doesn't escape me now. Cecilia left when Nolan was 8. You build homes for everyone but us, her note said. She wasn't entirely wrong, but she wasn't right either. I'd built everything for them, just not in the way she needed. After the divorce, Pacific Legacy expanded rapidly. I channeled all my energy into growth. We opened offices in 3 coastal towns. Our blue and silver signs became fixtures on the most prestigious properties. The Aston Martin came later, a midlife crisis perhaps. I found it in a widow's garage, neglected for years after her husband's death. The engine was seized, the leather cracked, but the bones were perfect. I negotiated a fair price and spent the next 5 years restoring it by hand. That car became my therapy. When deals were stressful, when Nolan was struggling in school, when the silence of my empty house became too much, I'd work on the Aston. Methodical, precise. Every problem had a solution, if you just found the right approach. By the time Nolan went to college, Pacific Legacy Realty was the premier agency on the coast. I had 32 agents, an operations team, and a reputation that opened doors. Your father is a legend, I overheard one of Nolan's friends tell him during a rare visit home. My dad says he's the only honest rich guy in real estate. Nolan just shrugged. Yeah. Well, legends are usually too busy being legends to be anything else. That cut deep. But I understood. To him, I was the absent father who valued property over presence. He didn't see the nights I'd stayed up reviewing his college applications after closing 3 deals. He didn't know I'd quietly paid for his spring break trip when his summer job money ran out. Perhaps that was my failure, not showing him the connection between my work and my love. When Nolan brought Ivy home, I saw the ambition in her eyes immediately. She asked sharp questions about the business, property values, client psychology. I recognized that hunger. It mirrored my own at her age. She's going places, I told Nolan after she'd gone to bed that first visit. Smart choice. She gets me, he said simply. I should have recognized the warning in those 3 words. Not, I love her, or, she's special, but, she gets me. Validation, not connection. Their wedding was lavish, more than they could afford. I paid the difference quietly, telling the vendors to keep it between us. Another mistake, perhaps, teaching him that problems disappeared when Dad handled them. 5 years ago, at 59, I had a minor heart attack. Nothing dramatic, just a warning. The doctors advised reducing stress, so I stepped back from daily operations, promoting Vince Porter to managing director, while maintaining majority ownership. Semi-retirement, I called it. In reality, I still reviewed major transactions, still held veto power over acquisitions. The company was my identity. I couldn't fully let go. The beach house became my refuge. I expanded the deck, upgraded the kitchen, planted native grasses along the dune path. I imagined grandchildren someday running across those weathered boards, learning to swim in the protected cove below. Instead, my son sold it all while I was unconscious. Every brick I laid, every client I helped, every compromise I made, all of it betrayed in a single signature. But what Nolan failed to understand was simple. Men who build empires from nothing don't fold when faced with treachery. They plan, they wait, and when the moment is right, they remind the world exactly how they became powerful in the first place. I'm about to reveal how deep this betrayal went, and trust me, what happened next shocked even my investigators. The evidence I uncovered made me question everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. I debated whether to share this next part at all. It's the darkest moment of my life. For those watching without supporting, I understand hesitation, but this isn't just my story anymore. It belongs to anyone who's ever been betrayed by someone they loved. If you've felt that knife in your back, you already know why I couldn't stay silent about what comes next. The seeds of betrayal were planted long before my son signed those papers. I see that now. Maybe if I'd looked closer, I would have noticed the tiny fractures spreading through our foundation. The divorce changed Nolan. Of course it did. He was old enough to understand absence, but too young to process abandonment. I still remember the morning after Cecilia left. Nolan came downstairs, looked at the empty kitchen, and asked, "Is Mom at the store?" I sat him down and explained as gently as I could. His face didn't change, not a tear, not a tremor. He simply nodded and asked if he could have cereal for breakfast. That unnatural calm worried me more than any tantrum would have. 2 weeks later, his teacher called. Nolan told the class his mother died in a car accident. She said, I wanted to express my condolences before I realized, as well, that it wasn't true. When confronted, Nolan shrugged. It's easier than explaining she didn't want us anymore. I should have gotten him therapy then. Instead, I bought him a PlayStation and worked later hours. By 12, Nolan had mastered the art of self-sufficiency. He made his own meals, did his own laundry, managed his homework without reminders. I praised his independence, not recognizing it for what it was, a child adapting to emotional neglect. You're so mature for your age, teachers would tell him. They didn't see what happened at home. How he'd forge my signature on permission slips rather than ask me to sign them. How he'd tell me about parent-teacher conferences the day after they occurred. You were busy, he'd say when I confronted him. I handled it. I was raising a boy who believed love was conditional upon self-reliance, who thought his value was measured by how little he inconvenienced others. My son was becoming a master of manipulation, not out of malice, but survival. The incident with the broken window stands out now. He was 14, home alone, playing baseball in the yard despite my rules against it. A wild throw, shattered glass. When I came home, he had a story prepared about neighborhood kids, complete with descriptions and fake witness accounts. I almost believed him until I found the baseball glove hidden in the garage. Why lie? I asked, more curious than angry. You have enough problems, he said. I didn't want to add to them. Translation: I didn't want to risk your disappointment. I didn't want to test if your love had limits. That's when the money started disappearing. Small amounts at first, 20 from my wallet, 50 from the emergency cash. When questioned, He'd look genuinely confused, suggesting I'd miscounted or forgotten expenses. I installed a small safe in my closet. He cracked the combination within a week. The school counselor suggested Nolan was acting out for attention. But it wasn't attention he craved, it was security. Each successful deception proved he could control his environment, predict and manage outcomes, protect himself from potential abandonment. I tried different approaches. Stricter rules led to more creative evasions. More freedom led to more significant boundary testing. More quality time together felt forced and awkward. By 16, Nolan had perfected his public persona. Charming, accomplished, the kind of son fathers bragged about. Honor roll student, volunteer at coastal cleanup events, part-time job at the marina where he was quickly promoted to shift supervisor. "Your boy's going places," strangers would tell me. "You must be proud." I was, and concerned, because I also saw glimpses of his shadow self calculating, emotionally detached, viewing relationships as transactions. When Nolan was 17, I caught him selling term papers to classmates. Not just any papers, customized work based on each student's previous writing style, carefully crafted to avoid plagiarism detection. "It's just business, Dad," he said when confronted. "I'm providing a service to willing customers. Isn't that what you taught me? Find a need and fill it?" That moment chilled me. He'd absorbed my work ethic but none of my ethics. College applications loomed. Nolan set his sights on prestigious business schools, stepping stones, he called them. He spoke about connections and networks, never about learning or passion. Success was his only religion. Then came the scholarship essay incident. The prompt asked about overcoming adversity. Nolan wrote about growing up with a terminally ill mother who fought cancer throughout his childhood before succumbing to the disease his sophomore year. The essay was beautiful, moving, completely fabricated. "They want tragedy," he explained when I discovered the draft. "This is what wins scholarships." "But it's a lie," I said. "Your mother left. She didn't die." "Same difference to me," he replied with a shrug. "At least this version makes people want to help instead of pity." I tore up the essay. He wrote another behind my back and won $50,000. That pattern continued through his university years. Nolan excelled academically but treated ethics as flexible guidelines. He joined a prestigious fraternity, cultivated friendships with the wealthiest students, dated strategically, always climbing, always calculating. When he met Ivy during junior year, I hoped she might ground him. She came from old money but had a sharp mind of her own. What I didn't realize was that they recognized something in each other, a shared talent for social camouflage, for appearing to be whatever a situation required. Their relationship accelerated quickly, too quickly. Within 6 months, they were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences, mirroring each other's gestures. Not love, exactly, but perfect alignment of ambition. After graduation, Nolan rejected my offer to join Pacific. Legacy. "I need to make my own way," he said, taking a job at a rival firm. Prove myself. I respected that decision, even felt proud of his independence. 3 years later, when he and Ivy announced they were starting their own boutique agency, I sent champagne and referrals. When their business struggled, I connected them with clients. When they needed capital for expansion, I co-signed loans. When they failed anyway, I welcomed them home without judgment. Every step, I was trying to rebuild what broke when he was 8 years old. Trying to prove my love wasn't conditional. That failure didn't equal abandonment. Instead, I was teaching him a different lesson, that my resources were limitless, my forgiveness guaranteed, that I would never see the knife until it was already in my back. I've been staring at this screen for hours, wondering if I should share what comes next. The evidence I found in Nolan's office still makes my hands shake. I never wanted to believe my own son could know. You deserve the whole truth, however painful. I'm risking everything by telling this story publicly. For those watching silently without showing support, imagine discovering your entire relationship with someone you loved was built on calculation, not connection. If you've ever had that moment of devastating clarity, you already understand why I couldn't stay silent. The next part of this story changed how I view family forever, and it might change yours too. The heart attack wasn't dramatic. No clutching my chest, no collapsing to the floor, just pressure, like someone sitting on my sternum, and a tingling in my left arm that wouldn't subside. Mild myocardial infarction. the doctor said. A warning shot across the bow. I'd need surgery, a triple bypass. Not immediately life-threatening, but not optional either. We scheduled it for the following month. Nolan and Ivy arrived at the hospital the day before pre-op, bringing flowers and concern. They'd been staying at the beach, a house since their business collapsed, supposedly house hunting for a new start. We'll handle everything while you recover, Ivy said, arranging lilies in a vase beside my bed. You just focus on getting better. Nolan nodded, squeezing my shoulder. Don't worry about a thing, Dad. I've got this covered. I believed him. After all, he was approaching 40, long past the rebellions of youth. Our relationship had mellowed into something resembling friendship. Or so I thought. The morning of the surgery, Nolan arrived early, holding a leather portfolio. Just some paperwork that needs signing, he explained. Insurance forms mostly. And temporary power of attorney so I can manage your affairs while you're recovering. I scanned the documents quickly, recognizing standard medical authorization forms. The power of attorney looked legitimate, limited in scope, set to expire in 90 days. This all seems reasonable, I said, signing where indicated. The anesthesiologist was waiting, and my mind was on the procedure ahead, not legal technicalities. Nolan collected the papers, sliding them into his portfolio. That's it. Now you can rest easy. The last thing I remember before the anesthesia took hold was his face above mine, smiling. Not with warmth, I realize now, but with satisfaction. I woke up in recovery, groggy and intubated. The surgery had gone well, but my body needed time to heal. I drifted in and out of consciousness for days, vaguely aware of nurses checking my vitals, of Nolan visiting briefly, of the steady beep of monitors. On day 4, as I was becoming more lucid, I overheard Nolan in the hallway outside my room, speaking in hushed tones. The beach house went through without a hitch, he was saying. The car too. We're just waiting for the funds to clear. I thought I'd misheard through the haze of pain medication. Why would he be discussing my property? When he entered the room, I asked directly, "Is something happening with the house?" His face betrayed nothing. Just some maintenance issues, nothing to worry about. I should have pressed further, should have demanded details, but I was tired, in pain, and still trusted my son. The next day, I received the call from the closing agent that changed everything. After confirming my property had indeed been sold, I requested immediate discharge. The doctor protested, but I insisted. I needed to see for myself what had happened. The taxi dropped me at Lighthouse Point. Sure enough, a sold sign stood in the front yard. A moving truck was parked in the driveway. Strangers carried furniture, my furniture, out the front door. I approached, still wearing my hospital ID bracelet. "Excuse me," I called to a man directing the movers. "There's been a mistake. This is my home." The man turned, confused. "We bought this property fair and square, mister. Closed yesterday. May I ask who you purchased it from?" "Meridian Shore Holdings," he replied. "Through Pacific Legacy Realty. My own company. My own son." The betrayal was complete. I didn't confront the new owners further. This wasn't their fault. Instead, I called a cab and directed it to my office downtown. The receptionist looked shocked when I walked in. "Mr. Marlowe, we thought you were in the hospital." "I was. Now I'm here." I moved past her toward my old office, now used by Vince Porter. He jumped when I entered, phone to his ear. "I'll call back," he said quickly, hanging up. "Elias, you shouldn't be up and about yet. I need to see the paperwork on the sale of my property," I said without preamble. His face fell. "Nolan said you'd approved everything, that you wanted a quick, quiet sale. Show me." He pulled up the files on his computer, turning the screen so I could see. There it was, my signature on the listing agreement, my signature on the transfer of title, my signature authorizing the sale of the Aston Martin as part of the deal. Except they weren't my signatures. Close, very close, but not mine. "Who processed this?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Nolan handled most of it directly," Vince admitted. "Said you wanted to keep it in the family since it was a personal matter." I stared at the documents, ice forming in my chest. The power of attorney I'd signed wasn't for medical decisions. It had been swapped for a comprehensive document giving Nolan full control of my assets. "And the proceeds?" I asked. "Where were they directed?" Vince looked uncomfortable. "To a new account at Pacific National. Nolan said you were consolidating your holdings, an account I had no access to, no knowledge of. As I left the office, my phone buzzed. A text from Ivy. The movers are finished at the house. Everything went smoothly. Hope you're feeling better. They didn't even know I'd been discharged. They thought I was still drugged and bedridden while they liquidated my life. When I reached my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed and did something I hadn't done since Cecilia left. I wept. Not from sadness, but from pure, clarifying rage. Then I dried my eyes and made 3 calls. First, to my bank, freezing all remaining accounts. Second, to a security company, changing the locks and codes at my office. Third, to Marisol Ben-Ari, the most detail-oriented person I knew at Pacific Legacy. I need your help, I told her, and I need absolute discretion. Whatever you need, she said without hesitation. I need to prove that my own son has stolen my life out from under me. There was a pause then. Come to my house tonight, not the office. Bring whatever documentation you have. As I hung up, another text came through from Nolan. Just checking in. Nurses say you're making good progress. Don't worry about anything. It's all under control. For the first time in our complicated history, he was telling the absolute truth. Everything was indeed under his control. But not for much longer. I've been debating whether to continue sharing this story. The evidence I uncovered in the next 48 hours nearly destroyed me. The paper trail Marisol and I pieced together revealed a betrayal so calculated it made me question every moment with my son. For those watching without supporting, imagine discovering years of manipulation hidden behind a smile you trusted completely. The journal entries we found in Nolan's desk detailed exactly how he planned to transition my assets long before my health issues. I'm exposing my family's darkest secrets because silence protects the wrong people. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you'd give your life for, you already understand why I can't stop now, even as my hands shake typing these words. Marisol Ben-Ari lived in a small bungalow 20 minutes from town. When I arrived that night, she already had her dining table covered with laptops and file folders. I pulled everything I could without raising flags. She said, "No preamble. The digital trail is concerning." She'd been with Pacific Legacy for 15 years, starting in document processing before becoming our chief compliance officer. If anyone could trace the paper trail, it was her. "Show me," I said, taking off my jacket. The surgical incision on my chest burned with every movement, but I ignored it. First, the power of attorney. She slid a document toward me. "This is what was filed with our records department, not what you thought you were signing." The document gave Nolan comprehensive control over all my assets, not just medical decisions, not just temporarily, but complete authority with no expiration date. "The signatures match those on the property transfer," she continued, "but they don't match your signature from last month's corporate filings. Subtle difference is the loop on the E, the slant of the cross on the 8, close enough to pass a casual inspection, but definitely forged." "When did this start?" I asked. Marisol tapped her keyboard, bringing up a timeline. "Based on system access logs, Nolan began accessing your personal files about 3 months ago using your credentials. That's impossible. I never shared my passwords." "No, but he installed keylogging software on your home computer." She showed me the digital evidence, timestamps, data packets, sent to an external server. "It captured everything you typed." The violation felt physical, like another incision alongside my surgical wound. "With your login information, he accessed everything. Banking, investment accounts, property records. He's been building a comprehensive picture of your assets for months, while living under my roof," I added. "Eating my food." Marisol nodded grimly. "There's more. He created a shadow company, Meridian Shore Holdings, using stolen funds from your equity line of credit." She pulled up the incorporation documents. Nolan and Ivy were listed as principals, with a business address I didn't recognize. Then he used Meridian to buy your property from himself, acting as your representative through the fraudulent power of attorney. I stared at the interlocking web of deception she'd mapped out. Why go through such an elaborate scheme? Why not just wait and inherit everything? Because of this. She opened another file, my updated will from last year. You established that significant portion of your estate would go to a coastal conservation trust. The change I'd made after reading about rising sea levels threatening the shoreline. I'd planned to tell Nolan eventually, never imagining he'd discover it by spying on my private documents. So he decided to take it all now. I said, the pieces fitting together. before I could give any more away. We worked through the night, Marisol methodically documenting each fraudulent transaction, each digital footprint. Dawn was breaking when she sat back, rubbing her eyes. "We have enough to go to the police," she said. "This is criminal fraud, identity theft, computer crimes, serious charges." I stood at her window, watching the sunrise. "Not yet, Elias. He stole millions from you, your home, and going to the police would make it public record. It would destroy the company's reputation." I turned to face her. "I built Pacific Legacy on trust. If clients learn the founder's son committed fraud using company resources..." She understood immediately. "We'd lose everything. Everyone who works for you would suffer." "Exactly. This needs to be handled internally." Marisol studied me. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking Nolan wants to play real estate games." I picked up the Meridian Shore Holdings documents. "Let's see how he handles playing against someone who invented the rules." We spent the next day building our strategy. First, we needed to track the money, the proceeds from my property sale. Marisol discovered Nolan had directed the funds to a new account at Pacific National Bank, then immediately wired most of it offshore to a shell company in the Caymans. "He's moving fast," she noted, "planning to disappear once everything's liquidated. Can we claw back any of it?" "Some. I've identified $840,000 still in domestic accounts we can freeze with the right documentation." While Marisol worked the financial angle, I focused on the property itself. The sale wasn't fully recorded yet, still in the escrow phase. As the legitimate owner of Pacific Legacy Realty, I had certain privileges. I called our in-house counsel, Deanna Wu, bringing her into our confidence. "We need to find a regulatory hold on this transaction," I explained. "Something legitimate but uncommon." Deanna thought for a moment. "The Coastal Erosion Survey. It's a new county requirement for oceanfront properties. Most transactions are grandfathered in, but we could flag this one for compliance review." "How long would that delay closing?" 30 days minimum, potentially months, if we find any issues requiring mitigation." "Do it," I said, quietly. Next, I needed to secure my remaining assets before Nolan discovered I was onto him. I still had investment accounts he hadn't yet accessed, safe deposit boxes he didn't know about. Marisol helped me establish new accounts under a trust name, transferring funds through a series of legitimate but complex transactions that would be difficult to trace. "What about your office?" she asked. "He still has access to Pacific Legacy systems." "Not anymore." I showed her my phone, a confirmation from IT that all security credentials had been reset due to a system upgrade. I was erasing Nolan's access point by point, preparing for the moment he realized his plan was unraveling. That moment came sooner than expected. My phone rang. "Nolan." "Dad, there's some kind of problem with the lighthouse point closing," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Something about a coastal survey?" "Really?" I kept my tone neutral. "That sounds like a regulatory issue." "The thing is, we're already in escrow. The buyers are getting antsy. These things happen in real estate," I said. "You know that." A pause. "Have you been discharged? The nurses said you weren't in your room." "I needed some fresh air," I replied. "Doctor approved, of course." Another pause. Longer this time. I could almost hear him recalculating. "Well, don't worry about this property issue," he said finally. "I'll handle it." "I'm sure you will," I replied. "You've been handling quite a lot lately." After we hung up, Marisol looked at me. "He knows something's wrong." "Yes," I agreed. "Now the real game begins." I wasn't just fighting to recover my property. I was dismantling a betrayal piece by piece, using the very systems my son had tried to exploit against me. And I was just getting started. The evidence we uncovered over the next 48 hours shook me to my core. I've been wrestling with whether to continue sharing these painful details. Every document we found, every transaction we traced, revealed a betrayal more calculated than I could have imagined. For those watching, without supporting, imagine discovering that someone had been planning your financial execution for years while smiling to your face. My hands still shake remembering what Marisol found in Ivy's email account. I'm exposing these wounds publicly because silence only protects those who abuse trust. If you've ever had your kindness weaponized against you, you understand why I can't stop now, even though reliving this brings back the crushing weight on my chest that no surgery could fix. While I worked silently to unravel Nolan's scheme, he and Ivy accelerated their social ascension. Apparently, stealing millions gives one extraordinary confidence. 2 weeks after my surgery, still unaware I was building a case against them, they appeared in the local paper. The headline made me choke on my coffee. Local couple establishes Coastal Heritage Foundation. The article detailed their new charitable organization dedicated to preserving oceanfront properties for future generations, funded by their successful real estate investments. Their investments, my life's work. They're laundering their reputation, Marisol said when I showed her, creating a legitimate public face for their stolen funds. The photo showed them smiling on the deck of my beach house, my former beach house with Ivy, wearing a necklace I recognized. It had belonged to my mother. I hadn't even noticed it was missing. They're getting bolder, I noted, more visible. It's strategic, Marisol replied. They're establishing themselves as philanthropists. Makes any future accusations against them seem less credible. She was right. The community was embracing them as the new coastal elite. Invitations to charity galas, quotes in business articles, appearances at city council meetings, advocating for environmental protections. The irony was suffocating. They'd stolen from me to fund a foundation mimicking the exact conservation trust I'd planned to support in my will. Then came the announcement that pushed me from calculation to cold fury. Nolan and Ivy were nominated for the Chamber of Commerce's annual Stewardship Award, recognizing outstanding contributions to coastal preservation and community development. The gala was scheduled for the following month at the Grand Harbor Hotel. According to the press release, they were considered front-runners for the honor. They're using my reputation, I told Marisol during our daily strategy session. The community respects the Marlowe name because of decades of my work. Now they're leveraging that goodwill, while systematically erasing you from the narrative, she agreed. Our investigation had revealed the full extent of their deception. Beyond selling my property, they had redirected my investment account statements to a P.O. box they controlled, transferred ownership of my remaining vehicles to their shell company, attempted to access my safe deposit boxes using the forged power of attorney, contacted my doctor, suggesting I was experiencing cognitive decline, started the paperwork to list my office building for sale. Each discovery felt like another surgical incision without anesthesia. They're not just stealing assets, I realized. They're stealing my identity, my legacy. The most disturbing evidence came from Nolan's cloud storage, which Marisol had legally accessed through company systems. There, we found a document simply titled Transition Plan. It detailed, in cold business language, how to systematically strip me of everything I owned while creating the appearance that I was willingly downsizing due to health concerns. The final phase included relocating me to a managed care facility in Arizona, far from my business and community, where I would receive appropriate supervision while adjusting to cognitive limitations. They planned to declare me incompetent, take control of everything, and essentially imprison me in a memory care facility, despite my being completely sound of mind. This is beyond theft, Marisol whispered, her face pale as we reviewed the document. This is erasing a person. I felt strangely calm. The pain had transcended into something else, a crystalline clarity of purpose. Have they filed any competency paperwork yet? I asked. Not formally, she replied, checking her notes. But they've been building the groundwork. Notes in your medical file about memory issues you don't actually have. Emails to your primary physician, expressing concerns about your decision-making. I nodded. So we still have time. While Marisol continued tracing financial records, I focused on reclaiming my narrative. I contacted my doctor for a complete cognitive assessment, which I passed with perfect scores. I had the results notarized and filed with my attorney. I made strategic appearances around town lunch with business associates, conversations with influential community members, a donation to the local hospital. Small moves, but enough to counter any rumors about my declining health, all while Nolan and Ivy continued their public relations campaign. They hosted a fundraiser at my beach house, raising $50,000 for coastline protection, earning them a front-page photo in the local paper. They launched a scholarship program for students pursuing environmental science named after themselves. Of course, they even purchased a new yacht using my money and christened it Legacy, a knife twist so obvious it almost made me laugh. Throughout it all, They maintained the fiction that I was recovering quietly, sending occasional text messages asking about my health while systematically dismantling my life. The Stewardship Award Gala is 3 weeks away, Marisol noted during one of our meetings. Based on their pattern, they'll use that event to cement their new position in the community. I studied the invitation I'd received addressed to the Pacific Legacy Realty team, rather than to me specifically. Another subtle erasure. Then, that's our deadline, I decided. Everything needs to be in place by then. What exactly are you planning, Elias? Marisol asked, concern in her eyes. I looked at the invitation again, at the embossed lettering announcing the celebration of community leaders and environmental champions. They want to be recognized for their stewardship, I said quietly. I think it's time to show everyone exactly what they've been stewarding. The pieces of my counterattack were falling into place. Marisol had secured the financial documentation. Deanna had filed the legal paperwork. The technical team had preserved the digital evidence. All that remained was the moment of truth, the public reckoning. As I planned my approach, Nolan sent another text. Great news, Dad. We've been nominated for the Stewardship Award. Would mean a lot to have you there if you're feeling up to it. No pressure, though. I smiled at my phone and replied, wouldn't miss it for the world. I've been struggling to continue sharing this story as I approach the most public moment of my humiliation. What happened at that gala exposed wounds that will never fully heal. For those watching without supporting, imagine standing alone against people who've constructed an elaborate fiction about your life, your health, your very identity. The documents I assembled for that night tell a story of betrayal so methodical it still steals my breath. I'm sharing these painful details because remaining silent only protects those who manipulate trust. If you've ever had to stand up against a convincing lie told by someone everyone believes, you understand the terrifying isolation I felt preparing for that night. Some of you have asked if justice is even possible against such calculated deception. The next part answers that question. 3 weeks isn't long to rebuild your life after someone steals it. But when you've spent decades constructing complex real estate deals, you learn to work with deadlines. We need to approach this like a high-stakes closing, I told Marisol as we established our war room in her dining area. Every detail documented, every contingency planned for. First priority, securing what remained of my assets. We'd managed to freeze the domestic accounts holding about $840,000 of my stolen funds, but the offshore transfers, nearly $3 million, were beyond immediate reach. We'll need international attorneys for those, Marisol noted, adding it to our tracking document. That's a longer game. Second priority, building an airtight case. We organized the evidence chronologically. The forged power of attorney, the keylogging software installation records, the unauthorized access to my accounts, the fraudulent property transfer, the attempt to declare me mentally incompetent. Each piece of evidence was attorney-salved, copied, notarized when possible, and filed both physically and digitally in secure locations. What about the Aston Martin? Marisol asked. They've already transferred title. I've located it, I said. They're keeping it at a storage facility near the marina. Not driving it, just holding it as an asset. Can we recover it legally? The title transfer was fraudulent, but unwinding it takes time. For now, let's focus on the bigger pieces. As our case solidified, I maintained my shadow presence around town, visible enough to counter rumors of mental decline, but not conspicuous enough to alert Nolan and Ivy. 2 weeks before the gala, they escalated their plans. My private investigator reported they'd toured 3 assisted living facilities in Arizona, posing as concerned family members seeking memory care for their father. They've put down a deposit at Sunrise Meadows, he told me, sending photos of Nolan signing intake forms. Secured a room starting next month. A prison cell, in effect. Somewhere I could be tucked away and forgotten while they enjoyed my life's work. They're accelerating, Marisol observed. They must suspect something. She was right. That same day, Nolan called rather than texting, something he rarely did since executing his plan. Dad, how are you feeling? His voice carried practiced concern. Improving every day, I replied neutrally. Good, good. A pause. Listen, Ivy and I have been thinking about your recovery. This big house, all the maintenance. It's a lot for someone healing from major surgery. Is it? I kept my tone mild. I manage fine. Well, We've found this amazing community in Sedona. Beautiful views, full medical staff, activities. Sounds like a retirement home. I interrupted. More of a wellness community. He countered smoothly. Many residents are fully independent. We just thought, with the house sold and everything, you might want a fresh start somewhere peaceful. The practiced pitch, the careful avoidance of terms like memory care or assisted living, all part of the script outlined in his transition plan document. That's thoughtful, I said. Let me think about it. Of course, he replied, relief evident. No rush, though they do have limited availability. After we hung up, I turned to Marisol. They're making their final move. We redoubled our efforts, working through nights, gathering the last crucial pieces of evidence. Deanna finalized the legal documentation to contest the property transfer. My forensic accountant completed the tracing of all financial movements. 10 days before the gala, I visited my doctor for another cognitive assessment, this one videotaped with his permission. For the record, I explained, I need documentation of my mental competence. He looked troubled. Is this about the calls from your son? He's contacted me several times expressing concerns about your memory. That's exactly why I'm here, I confirmed. I need objective evidence. The assessment was comprehensive memory tests, cognitive function, decision-making capacity. I scored in the 98th percentile for my age group. Whatever, concerns have been raised, my doctor said afterward. I see no evidence supporting them. 1 week before the gala, I met with Vincent Porter and my managing director who had unwittingly facilitated Nolan's fraud. I've been an idiot, he said when I showed him the evidence. He had your power of attorney. I never questioned. You were manipulated by someone who'd been planning this for months, I interrupted. Now I need your help making it right. Together, we reviewed the property transaction, identifying the precise regulatory issues that could invalidate it. As I suspected, Nolan had cut corners in his haste, skipping environmental assessments required for waterfront properties. 3 days before the gala, I visited my attorney, updating my will and establishing an irrevocable trust that would protect my remaining assets. And I want this document, I said, sliding a sealed envelope across his desk. What is it? A letter to be opened in the event of my sudden death or unexpected mental incapacity. Inside was the complete documentation of Nolan's scheme, with instructions to take it to authorities, insurance, in case they tried something desperate. 2 days before the gala, I retrieved the last crucial piece of evidence, Nolan's personal journal. My investigator had discovered he kept one, locked in his desk at the beach house. Are you sure about this? Marisol asked as we reviewed the plan to access it. It's legally my house, I reminded her. Sold through fraud. I have every right to enter. I waited until they left for a charity luncheon, then used my original key, which still worked, to enter. The house felt simultaneously familiar and foreign. My furniture remained, but Ivy had redecorated with new art, new colors. Family photos had been removed. Evidence of my existence erased. The journal was where my investigator had indicated, locked in the bottom desk drawer. The key wasn't difficult to find, hidden in the false bottom of the pen holder, exactly where I used to hide my own keys. Like father, like son. The contents confirmed everything. Detailed notes on his plans, dating back over a year. Calculations of my net worth. Strategies for transferring assets gradually to avoid detection. Most damning was an entry from 3 months earlier. Dad's heart issues create the perfect opportunity. A medical emergency, some cognitive confusion. Afterward, no one questions family taking control for his own good. The power of attorney is key. Everything else flows from that. I photographed the relevant pages and returned the journal exactly as I'd found it. The final day before the gala, I prepared myself mentally. I'd been betrayed by my only child, the person I'd spent a lifetime providing for. The pain was immeasurable, but I couldn't let it cloud my purpose. Are you sure you want to do it this way? Marisol asked during our final review. We could handle this privately, through legal channels. I considered her question, remembering how publicly Nolan and Ivy had crafted their lies, how they'd leveraged my reputation while plotting to imprison me in a memory care facility. No, I decided. They chose to make their deception public. Their reckoning should be equally so. That night, I stood before my hotel mirror, practicing what I would say, not with anger, not with vengeance, but with the calm precision that had built my company. Justice doesn't need to shout. It simply needs to be undeniable. I've questioned whether continuing this story serves any purpose beyond reopening wounds that may never heal. The night of that gala changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone who witnessed what happened. For those still watching without supporting, imagine preparing to confront the deepest betrayal of your life in front of everyone you know. The evidence I assembled told a story so painful I still struggle to accept it, came from my own flesh and blood. I'm sharing these details not for sympathy, but because silence in the face of injustice only empowers those who would exploit trust. What happened next tested my resolve in ways I never imagined, and showed me exactly who would stand with truth when it was most difficult to hear. The Grand Harbor Hotel ballroom sparkled with chandelier light and the polished veneer of coastal wealth. 200 of the community's elite had gathered to celebrate environmental stewardship and community leadership, paying $500 a plate for rubber chicken and self-congratulation. I arrived early, dressed in my best suit. The surgical scar on my chest still pulled uncomfortably, but pain was an old companion by now. "Mr. Marlowe," the event coordinator seemed startled to see me. "We weren't sure you'd attend. Your son mentioned your health is dramatically improved." I finished smoothly. I wouldn't miss this for the world. She guided me to a table near the front, not the prominent center table where Nolan and Ivy would sit, but close enough. Perfect for my purposes. Marisol arrived minutes later, carrying a slim leather portfolio. "Everything's ready?" she confirmed quietly. "Just say the word." Guests filtered in, many doing double takes upon seeing me. I'd been the subject of concerned whispers for weeks, the formerly sharp businessman now supposedly declining, being cared for by his devoted son. Elias. Thomas Reeves, head of the Chamber of Commerce, approached with forced cheer. "Wonderful to see you up and about. Nolan told us you were still recovering." "Did he?" I smiled. How thoughtful of him to monitor my health so attentively. At 7 precisely, Nolan and Ivy made their entrance. They moved like royalty, accepting congratulations, shaking hands. Nolan wore a bespoke suit I recognized, purchased with my credit card. Ivy sparkled in diamonds that had once belonged to my mother. Then Nolan saw me. His stride faltered for just a moment, a micro-expression of shock quickly masked. He whispered something to Ivy, whose practiced smile never wavered as she scanned the room and located me. They approached with camera-ready concern. "Dad," Nolan embraced me carefully. "We didn't expect you to make it. Are you sure you're up for this?" "I'm exactly where I need to be," I replied, meeting his eyes directly. Something in my gaze must have communicated more than my words, because his expression flickered again. Uncertainty. Calculation. "Well, we're honored you're here," Ivy interjected smoothly, touching my arm with manicured fingers. "It means so much to have family support." Family. The word hung between us like shattered glass. "We should get to our table," Nolan said, glancing at the portfolio Marisol held. "The program's about to start." As they moved away, Marisol leaned close. "He's nervous. He knows something's off." "Good," I replied. "Let him wonder." The evening progressed with practiced ceremony. Salads were served. The chamber president welcomed everyone. A local conservationist gave a keynote about coastal preservation efforts. Throughout it all, I felt Nolan watching me between his practiced networking, calculating, assessing the threat. Finally, the moment approached. Thomas Reeves took the podium to announce the Stewardship Award nominees. 3 couples were in contention, but everyone knew who the favorites were. "And our final nominees," he announced, "Nolan and Ivy Marlowe, and for their establishment of the Coastal Heritage Foundation and their commitment to preserving our shoreline properties for future generations." Applause filled the room. Nolan and Ivy stood, acknowledging the recognition with practiced humility. I made my move. "Thomas," I called, rising from my seat, "if I might say a few words before the winner is announced." The room quieted. Thomas looked startled but nodded. "Of course, Elias. Ladies and gentlemen, Elias Marlowe, founder of Pacific Legacy Realty and," a glance toward Nolan, "father of our nominee." I approached the podium, calmly, my heart steady despite everything at stake. Marisol followed, setting the portfolio beside me before retreating. "Thank you," I began, surveying the room of familiar faces. "As many of you know, I recently underwent heart surgery. During my recovery, some Interesting developments occurred that I feel are relevant to tonight's award. Nolan shifted in his seat, whispering urgently to Ivy. I continued. The Coastal Heritage Foundation is indeed a worthy cause. Our shoreline deserves protection. I paused. But tonight isn't about environmental stewardship. It's about a different kind of stewardship, the careful management of truth. I opened the portfolio, removing the first document. 3 months ago, while I was hospitalized, my beach house at Lighthouse Point was sold without my knowledge or consent. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thomas looked uncomfortable but didn't interrupt. The sale was executed using this power of attorney document, allegedly signed by me. I held it up. Except, I never signed it. It was forged by my son, Nolan. Gasps now. Nolan half rose, but Ivy pulled him back down, whispering fiercely. The property was sold through Pacific Legacy Realty, my company, to a shell corporation called Meridian Shore Holdings. I produced another document. This entity, created specifically to facilitate the fraud, lists Nolan and Ivy Marlowe as its sole principals. The room had gone completely silent. I continued methodically, my voice steady. Using this fraudulent power of attorney, they transferred ownership of my assets, including my vehicle collection and investment accounts, to themselves. They redirected my financial statements, accessed my private records, and began the process of having me declared mentally incompetent. I produced the Arizona facility documents. They even secured a room at Sunrise Meadows Memory Care Facility, where they planned to relocate me, effectively imprisoning me while they enjoyed the fruits of my life's work. Nolan stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. Dad's been confused since his surgery. His medication is not affecting my cognitive function in any way, I interrupted, producing my medical assessment, as confirmed by 3 separate doctors who have certified me fully competent. In fact, my son's claims about my mental decline are part of a documented strategy to seize control of my assets. I revealed the copied journal pages, projected them onto the large screen behind me. Nolan's own handwriting, detailing his plans, his calculations, his timeline for my erasure. The Coastal Heritage Foundation, I continued, was created using funds stolen from me, a clever laundering of both money and reputation. While positioning themselves as philanthropists, they were systematically stealing from the very person who gave them everything. Ivy was pulling at Nolan's arm now, but he shook her off, his face contorted with fury and humiliation. You ungrateful, he started toward me, but 2 of my business associates stepped between us. I remained at the podium, my voice never rising. I've filed formal fraud charges. The property sale has been invalidated due to multiple regulatory violations and the fraudulent power of attorney. The financial transactions are being reversed, and Pacific Legacy Realty, which remains under my control as majority owner, has terminated all association with Nolan Marlowe, effective immediately. The room erupted in confused conversations. Thomas approached the podium, trying to regain control of his event, but the damage was done. In the chaos, Nolan finally reached me, his voice low and venomous. You could have handled this privately. Instead, you've humiliated us. I looked at my son, this stranger wearing my name, and felt a strange calm. You forged my signature while I was recovering from heart surgery. You sold my home. You planned to imprison me in a memory care facility. And you did it all while smiling to my face. I gathered my documents calmly. Privacy is a privilege you forfeited with the first betrayal. Security arrived to escort them out, but it wasn't necessary. They left voluntarily, Ivy's perfect composure finally cracking as tears streamed down her face. Nolan walked stiffly, back straight, not making eye contact with anyone. The award ceremony continued awkwardly. Another nominee was hastily declared the winner. I returned to my seat, accepting quiet words of support from stunned attendees. Are you all right? Marisol asked softly. I considered the question. My son had betrayed me. My reputation was tied to a public scandal. My recovery from surgery was complicated by weeks of stress. Yet I felt unburdened. Yes, I said finally. For the first time in months, I am. The truth had been released from its cage. Justice, while painful, had been served, not through shouting or violence, but through the simple, undeniable presentation of facts. As I left the ballroom that night, I knew everything had changed, but unlike the changes Nolan had planned for me, these would happen on my terms. The reclamation of my life had begun. I've struggled with whether to finish sharing this painfully personal story. The aftermath of that night brought consequences I never anticipated, both painful and profound. For those who followed this account without showing support, imagine standing in the wreckage of your family bonds, wondering what comes next when justice has been served but offers no healing. The evidence I presented that night was irrefutable, but truth alone doesn't restore what betrayal destroys. I'm sharing this final chapter because there's a difference between justice and vengeance that took me months to understand. If you've ever had to rebuild after winning a battle that left no true victors, you already know the hollow feeling that followed me home from that gala. Some have asked if I regret my public approach. The next part answers that question. The morning after the gala, my name dominated local headlines. Property mogul exposes son's fraud scheme, and real estate dynasty implodes at awards ceremony. Reporters called constantly. I issued one statement through my attorney, then retreated to a hotel while the storm raged. Legal proceedings began immediately. The fraud case was straightforward, with my overwhelming evidence. The district attorney's office moved quickly, freezing Nolan and Ivy's remaining accounts. They faced multiple felony charges: fraud, forgery, financial elder abuse. Within days, I received a message through Nolan's hastily hired attorney, a settlement offer. They would return all accessible assets and plead guilty to reduced charges if I would advocate for probation rather than prison time. It's a reasonable offer, my attorney advised. Saves you months of court appearances, potential appeals. I thought of Nolan's journal entries, the cold calculation, the room reserved at the memory care facility. Accept it, I decided. Not for him, for me. I didn't want revenge. I wanted restoration. The Aston Martin returned to my garage. The domestic accounts were unfrozen and transferred back to my control. The beach house ownership was invalidated, though the new owners were innocent purchasers who would need compensation. Nolan and Ivy pled guilty to 2 felony counts each. With my requested leniency, they received 5 years of probation, community service, and restitution payments. They avoided prison but would carry the felony records permanently. They left town immediately afterward. I heard they moved to Colorado, as far from the ocean as they could reasonably get. Ivy filed for divorce 6 months later. Pacific Legacy Realty survived, though the scandal tarnished our pristine reputation. I stepped back into leadership temporarily, steadying the company through the turbulence. The question everyone asked but few dared voice directly: how are you handling this betrayal? The truth? Some nights I woke gasping, the pain in my chest having nothing to do with my surgical scar. Some days I walked through the reclaimed beach house and saw memories in every corner. Nolan as a boy building sandcastles, as a teenager sulking on the deck, as a man bringing Ivy home for the first time. He was my legacy, I told Marisol during a quiet dinner months later. Everything I built was meant for him. No, she countered gently. Your legacy is integrity, the company you built, the reputation you earned, the example you set. He chose a different path. She was right, of course. My son had made his choices long before I'd discovered them. The betrayal had begun years earlier in small deceptions that grew into calculated treachery. What I mourned wasn't just his actions, but the realization that I'd never truly known him. As my physical recovery progressed, I made decisions about my future. I wouldn't let this betrayal define me or destroy what I'd built. The beach house was eventually repurchased at fair market value this time. I walked its halls again, not as a victim reclaiming stolen property, but as a man choosing to continue his life's journey. My legacy wouldn't end with betrayal. It would continue with rebuilding, resilience, and the quiet dignity that had guided me from the beginning. This painful chapter nearly broke me. For those watching silently, imagine rebuilding when the foundation itself has cracked. There's a world of difference between winning a legal battle and healing a wounded heart. I share these raw truths because sometimes the hardest lesson is learning when to fight for justice and when to walk away toward peace. The aftermath taught me that dignity isn't just about standing up against wrongdoing, it's also about how we carry ourselves afterward. 1 year after the gala, I sat alone on the beach house deck at dawn, the same horizon, the same rhythmic waves I'd watched for decades. Nature's constancy provided strange comfort after a year of upheaval. I held the original brass key to the house, the one I'd given Nolan during his childhood for emergencies, the one he'd used to begin his betrayal. Such a small thing to carry such weight. The legal battles had concluded months ago. The financial restoration was nearly complete, though the offshore accounts remained elusive. I'd accepted that some losses couldn't be recovered. My company thrived again under new leadership, younger, more innovative, but grounded in the principles I'd established. I remained as chairman, but embraced the true retirement I'd once only pretended to accept. Most importantly, I'd reclaimed my narrative. No longer the victim of betrayal or the righteous exposer of fraud, but simply Elias Marlowe continuing his story on his own terms. I received a letter from Nolan that morning, the first direct communication since the gala. I'd brought it to the deck, letting it sit unopened beside me as the sun climbed. Finally, as golden light spilled across the water, I broke the seal. No excuses, no justifications, just 5 handwritten words. I'm sorry. It was unforgivable. Below, an address not asking for response, just providing information, an acknowledgement that he'd surrendered any right to my reply. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in my pocket. Whether forgiveness would ever come remained uncertain, but acknowledgement of truth that was a beginning of sorts. I turned the brass key in my fingers once more, feeling its familiar weight. Then I stood, walked to the edge of the deck, and with a deliberate motion, tossed it far into the morning tide. Not in anger, not in symbolic finality, but in recognition that some doors need different keys now. I had spent a lifetime building security, through property, through assets, through control. The betrayal had stripped all that away, revealing a harder truth. No external fortress can protect us from those we choose to trust. Yet, here I stood anyway, continuing, breathing, finding new meaning. As I turned to go inside, I noticed a young family walking along the shoreline below parents with a small boy who darted in and out of the waves, laughing. Simple joy, uncomplicated trust, the foundations upon which all else rests. The tide takes, the tide gives, my fisherman father used to say. The ocean had taught him that loss and renewal existed in the same motion. I hadn't understood until now. Truth costs, justice costs, peace costs most of all. But watching that child's delight in the same waves that had just swallowed my key, I realized that what remains after betrayal is still, remarkably, defiantly valuable. A life, continued, transformed, but still mine to steward with the integrity that had always guided me. That was the legacy worth protecting all along. I share this final reflection, not for sympathy, but as testimony that even after profound betrayal, continuing is its own form of victory. For those who followed this journey silently, remember that rebuilding after devastation isn't just about reclaiming what was lost, but discovering what remains unbreakable within us. My story could have ended at the moment of public justice, but the harder, more meaningful work began in the quiet aftermath when headlines faded. Thank you for bearing witness to this painful truth. If my experience helps even one person recognize the warning signs I missed or find courage after their own betrayal, then sharing these wounds served its purpose.